Welcome to Podcasting for Latina CEOs, the go-to podcast for passionpreneurs Latinas ready to launch and grow their online businesses and own their voice with podcasting. I'm Heidy de la Cruz, writer, two-time award-winning podcaster, and podcast launch coach on a mission to help you build a life of freedom, wealth, and impact by turning your ideas into income. If you're a Latina ready to break generational cycles and create your own table, this show is for you. Let's build our dreams juntas. Con amor, Coach Heidy. My goodness. Welcome back to another episode of Podcasting for Latina CEOs. I am your host and your coach, Heidy de la Cruz, and I'm so excited to be back recording. Happy 2026. How was your holidays? I would love for you to send me a text message. Buzzsprout in the show notes has a little option to send a text. So send me a text and let me know how your holidays were, how your Christmas and New Year's. We actually went up north to Michigan to spend Christmas up there. And then we spent New Year's with my parents. And it was fun. It was a good holiday season. So let me know. I would love to hear. Now, before I get into today's episode, where I am going to be talking about why your podcast needs a website, I have 4 announcements. Okay. So, number 1, taxes. Okay, it is 2026. Tax season has started. I have joined the Dedicated Tax Pro firm to help with tax filing. Okay. I've heard too many stories of people getting scammed and ripped off or their taxes not being filed correctly. And I want to help my immigration community with filing taxes. So I joined Dedicated Tax Pros and we are ready to go, right? So I can start doing free estimates. I will include the link to the form in the show notes and the show description. So you can go ahead and sign up, or you can always send me an email at delacruz.dedicatedtaxpros@gmail.com. And again, I'll include that email also in the show notes. So let's get your taxes done correctly. We want to make sure that you get every single dollar that you are worth. And one thing you do not want to play with is the IRS. Okay, no matter who's president, no matter what administration, you do not want to mess with the IRS. All right, so let's get your taxes done correctly. That was announcement number 1. Announcement number 2. I am going to be leading a podcast panel at the Besties Boardroom in Jacksonville, Florida. Okay, so this is going to be January 26th through the 28th. I am going to be leading a podcasting panel. I am so excited. Thank you, Ashley, for this amazing opportunity. If you are interested in joining me at this women's business conference in Jacksonville, Florida, the link will be in the show notes and show description. I will include my affiliate link. So if you use that link to get your ticket, no matter which ticket you get, I will receive 20% commission. So join me at the Besties Boardroom in Jacksonville, Florida, January 26th through the 28th. I am leading a podcasting panel, but there's also going to be more information about businesses. There's a whole VIP thing. Like, there's just so much that you can learn from conferences, and I highly, highly recommend it and suggest it, especially when you are starting your entrepreneurship business or your podcast. Like, you can still learn a lot in regards to business when it comes to your podcast, okay? Which is actually another episode that I want to do, is like why your podcast is actually a business. But let me not go there right now. All right. Announcement number 3. Oh my goodness. This is a long-term goal of mine that I finally achieved. When I got this email, I almost cried. I was like so excited. I wish I would have had a camera to capture the moment I saw the email come through, because it was also really late at night, but it was on January 1st. So it was like, Happy New Year to me. So January 1st, it was late at night, and it was an email letting me know that my Google AdSense account had finally been approved. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Google AdSense, that is putting ads on your blog. And I literally have been applying to their program for years. And Google kept telling me, like, you need more high quality content. That was what I kept getting. And so, you know what? I just kept doing weekly blog posts, just putting out weekly blog posts about podcasting. I also do weekly blog posts about each of my immigration podcast episodes, I turn them into blog posts. So I just, stayed consistent. And finally, this year, they said yes. And so I'm so excited to start showing ads on my blog and start making that passive income. And again, if you listen to episode 6 on how to start a blog and make money from a blog, ads is one of the ways that you can monetize your blog. So if you're interested in that, go listen to episode 6. And also, you can get my guide that I created, my digital product, to help you start your blog and how to monetize from it. And also, it talks all about SEO, which you need to be able to rank on Google. So I have so much resources for you guys. It's crazy, but yes. So that is announcement number 3 and announcement number 4. Okay, I promise this is the last announcement and then we're going to get right into the episode. Announcement number 4 is last week I got my first sale from, my digital products. So I had someone purchase the Voice Method podcast launch workbook, which again is in my stand store, and I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, yes, it's the first sale of the year. Super excited. And then when I reached out to her to thank her for, purchasing the workbook, she said, I wouldn't have turned to anyone else. And I was just like, oh my God. Yes. Like I was just like, thank you for trusting me. And then she just said when she wrote back, like, I would not have turned to anyone else. I'm like, this is what it's all about. This is what it's like to be consistent. This is where it pays off when you being consistent and putting out good content and good resources builds that trust with your audience, and then they choose you when they are ready to start the podcast or start the business or whatever it is that you're helping them with. In my case, it's helping others start their podcasts and helping them start their online business, right? And so for her to say that, I was just like, oh my gosh, like that's it. That's what it's all about, is building that trust with your audience and having them trust you to then go and choose your resources, your products, or work with you on one-on-one because they know that you will get them to where they need to be, right? To what it is. So I can't wait for her to launch her podcast and see it come to fruition. And yeah, I'm so excited about that. All right. Those are all the announcements that I have for today. Let's get into today's episode as to why does your podcast need a website? So it doesn't matter what the reason that you started your podcast for. It could be because it's a hobby or a passion project or social change, or that your podcast is part of your business. Regardless of the reason, every podcast should have a website. So when starting your podcast, you are connecting with your audience in a more intimate way, right? You are probably listening to me right now while you are working out or doing the dishes or going on a walk. And it's just me, my voice, and you in your ears, right? And that is very intimate. So you are building trust with your audience as you go on with your podcast, just like I had mentioned before. But your podcast needs a home online, outside of Apple Podcasts, outside of Spotify. And then this is where your website comes in. So number one reason is you got to remember Google is still the number one search engine online. So SEO is king. That is literally how you find anything online. Okay. So while searching online, Google remains the number one search engine people turn to. They will go to Google before they go to Apple and Spotify. Now, don't get me wrong, people still do search on Apple and they still search on Spotify, which is why podcast SEO is very important. But when we're talking about a particular topic, like how to start a podcast, right? You can literally Google that and my articles come up on how to start a podcast, whether you're looking to start a podcast for free or, investments or anything like that. Like you can go see it, like Heidy de la Cruz, how to start a podcast, and it comes up. That is part of SEO and that is part of the website, right? So when people are looking for answers, they are looking for Google and they are looking for in-depth article that actually helps them answer their question, right? So having a website helps your podcast gets discovered by new listeners who may not have found you otherwise. Without a website, you are leaving discoverability on the table. Your podcast episodes, and when you turn them into blog posts, they can rank on search results and bring organic traffic and potential subscribers straight to your show. So yes, I can definitely attest to that because like I said, you go and Google my name, how to start a podcast, my articles come up, and because my traffic has been increasing. That's another reason why Google AdSense had approved my account. And then also, I have gotten the majority of my email subscribers I have gotten because of my blog. So people find my articles online. They like they like that I'm answering their questions, and then they sign up for my email list so then they can get weekly podcast coaching from me. And it's all part of getting people into your ecosystem. Another reason why it is great for your podcast to have a website is because long term content builds trust. Just like I said in the beginning, building that trust weekly with your audience, that's what website and your podcast does for your audience. So, don't let these internet streets fool you. Organic long term content is still king, like I said, SEO. So consider this: a podcast episode transformed into a blog post creates long lasting content that lives on the internet forever. So, also known as evergreen marketing or evergreen content. And this continues to work for you long after it's published. So, for example, I have articles out there that I have published in 2022 and 2023 that are still driving traffic to my website. People are still discovering my podcast because of my website, right? So, and I want you to understand, and I want you the same thing for you. We have to utilize these evergreen content strategies to build a sustainable podcast and build a sustainable business. Okay. So, unlike social media, where the algorithm stops pushing your content after 24 hours, a blog and a podcast episode can be discovered months or even years later. I recently went to go volunteer again for the refugees, and one of the other volunteers was on my other podcast. Her name is Jenny, and we recorded her episode early 2025, and her episode was released in October. And I told her, I was like, hey, even though we released your episode months ago, your episode is still the number one episode that is still being listened to today. And she was so shocked and so surprised. But this is what long-term content does behind the scenes. It continues to work for you and continues to drive traffic even when you don't show up, right? All right. So you started your podcast in the first place or your business to share knowledge, tell stories, and connect in a meaningful way. And having a website helps you with that. Short term content brings people into your ecosystem. We understand that. Like, you still want to use both, right? You want to use short term and long term. But we don't want to forget about long term, because I know a lot of people, when they think about marketing or digital marketing, they think about social media. And those are all short term marketing strategies, but we want to think about long term because we want the longevity and the sustainable business model, right? So yes, we can still do Instagram reels, TikToks, YouTube shorts. There's a need for that as well. But remember, those platforms are rented spaces. You don't own TikTok, you don't own Instagram, you don't own YouTube. And I don't know if you remember, but TikTok went away for like 24 hours and everybody was freaking out because they were just only relying on TikTok for their business. But those who had email lists and websites and blog posts and podcasts, we were not worried because we did not solely rely on social media for our business. So the other thing is, algorithms change all the time. We see it with Instagram all the time. So instead of relying on the constant change with the algorithm or relying on the trends, trying to keep up with the trends, a website, blog posts, and podcasts, like, you don't have to chase that. You don't have to chase the trends. You don't have to fight with the algorithm. Literally, SEO is working for you, okay, in the back end. So having short term content is great because then you can get people into your long term content, what then gets people into your ecosystem, which is your email list, or signing up to work with you on a one-on-one, or buying your digital products and things like that's all how it's all connected. So, but you definitely want to make sure that you have your website for your podcast to get that long-term content in. Oh, I've already mentioned this before. So you don't own social media, but you do own your website. So once you buy your domain, so for example, I have two. So for this podcast, I have coachheidi.com. And then for my other podcast, the immigration one, I have heidydelacruz.com. Because in heidydelacruz.com, I also share articles about podcasting, like I mentioned before. So those are my online real estate. I own those. It's really not frustrating, but it's really heartbreaking to see people build a business on borrowed online real estate. Cause like I said, we've seen it before when Instagram suddenly is like shut down or having issues. TikTok shut down for like 24 hours. And again, people were like freaking out because it's like, this is where my business is. This is where I connect with my audience. And it's like, no, we definitely want to get our audience off social media and into our ecosystem, our website, our email list, our podcast. Because again, we don't own social media, but your podcast, you own it, your website, you own it. Okay. That is online real estate, and that is also an asset for your business. Okay. Lastly, a website is important for your podcast if it ties into your business. Just like I said, it's an asset for your business having a podcast, having a website, right? So if you already have a website and you decide to start a podcast to tie to your business, then there you go. You just add a page for your podcast and a link and make sure that it's on your website. But if you are starting a podcast and then eventually you want to turn it into a business, which is again another episode that I want to talk about, then you can definitely create a website around your podcast. Regardless of which way you're going, like it is still very important to have a website and that your podcast is tied to that website. All right. So, how do you create a podcast website? So, I do have someone that hosts my website for me, and he can actually create a podcast website for you. So, if you do need a web designer to do it for you, or if you would like to invest in a web designer to do it for you, let me know, and then I can get you in contact with him. But there's also like design it yourself website platforms like WordPress or Squarespace that you can create a website, publish your blog post for each episode. I wrote an article on how to turn your podcast episodes into blog posts. I will link it in the show notes and show description so then you can take a look at that. There's also Buzzsprout. If you decide to host your podcast with Buzzsprout, they actually create a website for you. So it's literally a link and then it has the information of your podcast and then has all the episodes already there. So that's actually really convenient if you want to host with Buzzsprout. I can also include the affiliate link in the show notes and show description if you just want to go ahead and do that. So in a sense, I have Buzzsprout has the website for me for this podcast, but then I also have coachheidi.com. So I actually have two websites for this podcast now that I think about it. All right. So to wrap this all up, it is just so important to have online real estate, especially with your podcast and your business, because again, we don't want to build on borrowed real estate. We want to own it in case anything happens. You have your email list, you have your website, you have your podcast, right? You are able to reach your audience. And your podcast deserves to be more than just an audio floating around, on these internet streets. A website anchors your show, it helps you get found on Google, and it strengthens the trust that you are building with your audience. Use the short-term content to attract people, but your website and long-term content is what keeps them engaged. All right. So if you have any questions in regards to starting a website for your podcast, please send me an email, Heidy@HeidyDelacruz.com. If you have any further questions, or you can send me a text message. Again, the link is in the show notes. Buzzsprout has that feature that you can send me a text and then I would answer your question. And I can't wait to see you launch your podcast. All right. So thank you again so much for being here and for trusting me. And I will see you in the next episode. Con mucho amor, Coach Heidi.
Thank you for listening to Mommy Podcast.